Everyone in the Blackwood territory knew the name Elara Vance. She wasn't famous for her beauty or her strength. She was famous because she was the pack's biggest mistake. At 22 years old, Elara had never shifted. To the wolves of the Pacific Northwest, she was a biological dead end, a latent fit only for scrubbing floors. They spat on her shadow and called her useless. But history changed on the night of October the 14th. That was the night Alpha King Kaelin Thorne arrived, and the night the useless girl tore the roof off the hierarchy by shifting into something the world had forgotten existed. This is the story of the White Gold Wolf. The kitchen of the Blackwood packhouse smelled of stale grease bleach and the overwhelming metallic scent of despair. It was 4:00 a.m. Elara Vance was already awake, her hands red and raw from the icy water in the industrial sink. At 22, Elara was a ghost in her own home. In the werewolf world, if you haven't shifted by 16, you are pitied. If you haven't shifted by 18, you are ignored. By 20, if you are still in human skin, you are considered latent, a derogatory term that stripped you of your rank, your rights, and your dignity. Elara was the only latent in Blackwood history. Mr. Spot Runt. The voice came from the doorway. It was Sarah Miller, the bater's daughter, and Elara's primary tormentor since kindergarten. Sarah leaned against the frame, holding a steaming mug of coffee, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the ceramic. Elara didn't look up. She kept scrubbing the cast-iron skillet. "Good morning, Sarah." "It's a great morning," Sarah corrected, stepping into the kitchen. She poured the scalding coffee into the sink inches from Elara's hands. Elara flinched as the hot liquid splashed her wrist, but she bit her lip to silence the whimper. "Because tonight is the night I become a queen." The entire pack was buzzing with a nervous, electric energy. For weeks, Alpha Marcus had been running the pack members into the ground, cleaning every inch of the estate, manicuring the lawns and restocking the wine cellars. The Alpha King was coming. Kaelin Thorne. The name alone was enough to make grown wolves tuck their tails. He wasn't just a leader. He was an institution. He ruled over the 7 territories of the West Coast. Rumors about him were darker than a moonless night. They said he killed his own uncle to take the throne. They said his wolf was the size of a bear. They said he was looking for a mate, and he was tired of waiting. "I heard he eats latents for breakfast," Sarah sneered, leaning close to Elara's ear. "Maybe Alpha Marcus will finally sell you to him as a chew toy. It's all you're good for." Elara finally looked up. Her eyes were a striking, unusual shade of violet, the only thing about her that was even remotely interesting according to the pack. "If I'm so useless, Sarah, why do you spend every morning worrying about me?" Sarah's face twisted. She backhanded Elara across the cheek. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a pistol shot. Elara stumbled back, gripping the counter, tasting iron in her mouth. "Know your place, useless," Sarah hissed. "Tonight you stay in the cellar. If the king sees you, he'll think Blackwood is weak. And if you embarrass us, you won't live to see sunrise." Sarah stormed out, leaving Elara alone with the humming of the refrigerator and the throbbing in her cheek. Elara wiped the blood from her lip. She was used to the violence. Alpha Marcus encouraged it. In a society built on strength, the weak were reminders of genetic failure. But there was something Sarah didn't know. Something no one knew. For the past month, Elara had been feeling a fever burning under her skin. It wasn't a sickness. It was a vibration, a hum in her marrow that grew louder every time the moon crested. And specifically, ever since the announcement of King Kaelin's visit, the hum had turned into a roar. Elara walked to the small cracked mirror above the staff sink. She looked at her reflection. pale skin dark circles under her eyes, fraying oversized grey t-shirt. She looked broken. But when she stared deep into her own violet eyes for a split second, the reflection didn't look back. The pupils in the mirror dilated into vertical slits, glowing with a terrifying ancient gold light. Elara blinked, and it was gone. Just her tired human eyes remained. "Just stress," she whispered to herself. "Just stress." She went back to scrubbing. She had to finish the prep work for the banquet. 300 pounds of prime rib needed to be seasoned. Later that afternoon, the atmosphere in the pack house shifted from anxious to terrified. Black SUVs with government plates began rolling up the long, winding driveway of the estate. Security detail wolves in suits radiating lethal power fanned out across the perimeter. Elara was in the pantry hiding as she was told, organizing jars of preserves. She heard the heavy front doors open. She heard the booming voice of Alpha Marcus, overly loud and obsequious. "Your Majesty, welcome to Blackwood. We are honored, truly honored." And then she heard him. He didn't shout. He didn't boom. His voice was a low baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, traveling up through the soles of Elara's worn-out sneakers and settling deep in her chest. "Cut the pleasantries, Marcus. My enforcers found rogue scents 3 miles from your border. Your security is lax." Elara froze. The jar of strawberry jam in her hand slipped. She caught it before it hit the floor, her reflexes unnaturally fast. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. That voice. It wasn't just a voice. It was a command. And her body, her useless, latent body, was reacting to it with a pull so strong it almost knocked her over. "I want to see your roster," Calen Thorne said, his voice moving closer to the kitchen area. "Every member, ranked and unranked." Of course," Marcus stammered. "We have the reception in the Great Hall. Everyone is there." "Everyone?" Calen asked. The silence that followed was heavy. "I smell sage, and old blood, and something else." Elara stopped breathing. She was covered in the scent of the kitchen sage rosemary bleach, and the blood on her lip from Sarah's ring. "Just the kitchen staff, Your Majesty," Marcus said dismissively. "Nothing worth your attention. I will decide what is worth my attention." The footsteps stopped right outside the pantry door. Elara pressed her back against the shelves. Her eyes squeezed shut. The pull in her chest was agonizing now, a burning tether hooking her navel and dragging her toward the door. "Open it," a voice whispered in her head, a voice that wasn't hers. The doorknob turned. "Your Majesty," a third voice interrupted. It was Elder Thomas, the Pax historian. "The council is waiting in the library to discuss the border dispute." A pause. The doorknob released. "Very well," Calen said. The footsteps retreated. Elara slid down the wall to the floor, gasping for air. Her skin was burning hot. She looked at her hands. Her fingernails were lengthening, turning into hard, sharp points. She squeezed her fists tight, forcing them back. "Not now," she begged. "Please, not now." She didn't know what was happening to her, but she knew one thing. If she shifted now after 22 years, Alpha Marcus would kill her for hiding it, or worse, he'd use her. She had to survive the night. She just had to stay invisible. The Blackwood Pack Hall was transformed. What was usually a gymnasium-style meeting place was now draped in velvet and silk. Chandeliers rented from the city hung from the rafters. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume cologne and the pheromones of 200 wolves trying to impress one man. Elara was supposed to be in the cellar. That had been the plan. But plans changed when the head server, a nervous girl named Jenny, had a panic attack and passed out in the scullery just an hour before dinner service. Linda the Pack. Mother and Alpha Marcus's wife had stormed into the kitchen, her eyes wild. She found Elara chopping carrots. "You," Linda barked. "Put on a uniform, now." But Alpha Marcus said, "I don't care what Marcus said. We are down a server, and I will not have the Alpha King waiting for his wine. Put on the mask. No one will know it's you." So Elara was thrust into the lion's den. She wore the standard server's uniform, black slacks, a crisp white shirt, and a black domino mask that covered her eyes, a pretension Linda thought made the event look like a masquerade ball, though everyone knew who everyone was by scent anyway. Elara kept her head down, clutching a tray of crystal flutes filled with a dark vintage red blend. She moved through the crowd like a shadow. The room was segregated by rank. The lower-ranked wolves stood near the back, while the high-ranking families circled the dais where the high table was set. And there, sitting in the center, was Calen Thorne. He was terrifying. He didn't look like the local wolves. He was taller, broader. He wore a dark charcoal suit that strained against his shoulders. His hair was black as pitch, swept back, revealing a face that was all sharp angles and predatory stillness. But it was his eyes that stopped people cold. They were gold, not the yellow gold of a shifted wolf, but a metallic molten gold that swirled even when he was in human form. He looked bored. He swirled his drink, barely listening to Alpha Marcus, who was rambling about territory lines. Elara tried to stay on the periphery, but the head housekeeper signaled her aggressively to refill the glasses at the high table. "Don't look at him." "Don't look at him," Elara chanted internally. She moved to the table. She filled the beta's glass. She filled Linda's glass. She reached Alpha Marcus. "Careful," Marcus growled under his breath, not even looking at her. Elara moved to the final setting. The king. As she stepped into his personal space, the scent hit her. It wasn't just a smell. It was a physical force. It smelled like a thunderstorm, like ozone and pine and deep, wet earth. It smelled like home. Her hand trembled. The bottle clinked against his glass. The sound rang out in the sudden silence of the room. Elara froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Calen didn't reprimand her. He didn't move his glass. Slowly, he turned his head. Those molten gold eyes locked onto her masked face. For a moment, the entire room ceased to exist. Elara felt that burning tether in her chest snap tight, pulling her so hard she almost fell into his lap. Calen's nostrils flared. His pupils blew wide. He stood up. The movement was so abrupt, his heavy oak chair screeched backward. The music stopped. The conversation died. Every eye in the room turned to the king and the trembling servant girl standing before him. "Who are you?" Calen demanded. His voice wasn't bored anymore. It was rough, laced with a growl that made the hair on everyone's arms stand up. I'm just the help, Your Majesty," Elara stammered, clutching the wine bottle to her chest like a shield. Calen took a step toward her. He reached out a hand, his fingers aiming for her mask. "You smell." He trailed off, looking confused, almost pained. "You smell like silence." But underneath, "Is there a problem, Your Majesty?" Sarah Miller stepped forward. She was wearing a red dress that left very little to the imagination. She pushed herself between Elara and the king, blocking his view. "This is just Elara. She's our charity case. She's latent. Useless. Sarah laughed, a high, tinkling sound meant to diffuse the tension. She's probably terrified of you. She hasn't even shifted, and she's 22. A genetic dud. The king's eyes didn't leave Elara, even with Sarah in the way. Latent. He repeated the word, tasting strange in his mouth. Completely. Alpha Marcus chimed in, standing up to join the damage control. A defect. We keep her around to clean. She's harmless, I assure you. Get out of here, Elara, Marcus barked the command. Elara didn't need to be told twice. She turned and bolted. Wait, Kaelin roared. The command hit Elara like a physical blow to the back. It forced her knees to buckle. She dropped the wine bottle. It shattered on the marble floor, spraying red wine everywhere onto the white tablecloths, onto Sarah's red dress, and onto the polished shoes of the Alpha King. Gasps echoed through the hall. Sarah looked down at her dress, then at Elara. Her face contorted into a mask of pure rage. You clumsy bitch! Sarah didn't wait for permission. She shifted. It happened in seconds. One moment, Tren was a woman in a red dress. The next, bones cracked and reshaped fur sprouted, and a large, russet-colored wolf stood in her place. Fueled by humiliation and adrenaline, the wolf lunged at Elara. Elara was on her knees, surrounded by broken glass. She saw the jaws snapping toward her throat. She threw her arms up to protect her face, screaming, "Kill her!" The voice in Elara's head screamed. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a command from her very soul. Time seemed to slow down. Elara felt her skin split. Not the slow, painful shift described in biology books. This was an explosion. A blinding white light erupted from Elara's body, throwing Sarah's wolf backward through the air as if she'd been hit by a truck. The shockwave shattered every window in the great hall. Guests were knocked off their feet. Where the servant girl had been kneeling, a creature now stood. It was a wolf, but it was unlike any wolf the Blackwood Pack or the King had ever seen. It was massive, easily standing head and shoulders above Alpha Marcus's form. Its fur was a pure, blinding white, tipping into metallic gold at the extremities. But it was the aura radiating from it that terrified them. It wasn't just an alpha aura. It was ancient. It felt like the weight of a mountain. The white wolf shook its fur, sending a spray of light and power across the room. It looked down at Sarah, who was whimpering on the floor, and let out a snarl that cracked the plaster on the ceiling. Then the white wolf turned its gaze to King Kaelin. Kaelin was the only one still standing. He looked at the creature, his face pale, his eyes wide, with a mixture of shock and recognition. He fell to his knees. "The Selene," he whispered a word from a mythology so old most thought it was a fairy tale. "The moon's wrath." The white wolf didn't bow back. It snarled at the king, then turned, leaped through the shattered panoramic window, and vanished into the night. The forest was a blur of charcoal and moonlight. Elara wasn't running. She was flowing. In her human form, she tripped over her own feet. She had asthma. She had weak ankles. But in this form, this terrifying radiant white wolf form, she felt like gravity was a suggestion she could choose to ignore. She tore through the underbrush of the Blackwood Preserve, her paws hitting the earth with the force of pile drivers, yet making no sound. The sensory overload was intoxicating. She could smell the sap moving inside the pine trees. She could hear the heartbeat of a deer 3 miles away. But louder than the deer she heard them. The pack. Flank her left. Do not let her cross the river. It was Alpha Marcus's voice, distorted by his wolf shift, echoing through the trees. They were hunting her. The family that had raised her, the people she had cooked for, and cleaned up after, were now tracking her like a rabid animal. Elara skidded around a massive oak tree, her claws digging deep furrows into the dirt to pivot. A grey wolf. Beta Miller. Sarah's father burst through the ferns, snapping at her hind legs. Elara didn't think. Instinct took the wheel. She spun her white tail, whipping through the air like a lash. She slammed her shoulder into the beta's chest. The impact sounded like a car crash. Beta Miller yelped, flying 10 feet backward and smashing into a boulder where he slumped unconscious. She paused, confused by her own strength. "I didn't mean to—" "Run," the inner voice commanded. She bolted again. She could hear the heavy, rhythmic thudding of at least 20 wolves behind her. They were closing in. She reached the edge of the Raven's Gorge, a steep drop-off with a rushing river below. She was trapped. She turned to face the tree line, teeth bared a low growl rumbling in her chest that vibrated the stones beneath her paws. Alpha Marcus emerged from the shadows. He was a massive black wolf, scarred and battle-hardened. Flanking him were his top enforcers. They circled her heads low, ready to tear her apart. Marcus shifted back to human form, naked and furious, his eyes burning red. "You abomination," he spat. "I knew we should have drowned you at birth. You aren't a wolf. You're a monster." He signaled the enforcers. "Kill it. Bring me its head." 3 wolves lunged at once. Elara crouched, preparing to die. She closed her eyes. Whoosh! A dark blur fell from the sky, landing between Elara and the attackers with earth-shattering force. Dust and debris exploded outward, knocking the enforcers back. When the dust settled, a creature stood there. It was midnight, black, easily twice the size of Marcus, with eyes of molten gold. The Alpha King. He didn't growl. He didn't snap. He simply stood there, radiating an aura of dominance so heavy it felt like the air had turned to lead. The enforcers whined, dropping to their bellies, exposing their throats in submission. Even Alpha Marcus fell to his knees, unable to withstand the pressure of a royal alpha. The king turned his massive head toward Elara. She braced herself, expecting him to finish what Marcus had started. But the black wolf didn't attack. He took a step closer, sniffing the air. He made a soft, chuffing sound, a sound of comfort. Mate. The word wasn't spoken, but Elara felt it slam into her mind. The adrenaline crashed. The white fur receded. The bones reshaped. In seconds, Elara was human again, collapsing onto the mossy ground, shivering and naked. Before Marcus could even look, the king had shifted. In a fluid motion, Calen Thorne was human again. He ripped off his tattered suit jacket and draped it over Elara, wrapping her in his scent, warm, spicy, and safe. "Touch her," Calen said, his voice terrifyingly calm as he looked at Marcus. "And I will erase the name Blackwood from history." The ride back to the pack house was silent. Elara was placed in the back of the king's personal armored SUV. She was still wrapped in his jacket, staring out the window at the passing trees, her mind completely blank. The White Wolf. That's what they were whispering. When they arrived, the atmosphere had shifted from festive to funereal. The guests had been corralled into the main foyer. No one was allowed to leave. Calen marched Elara into the center of the room. He didn't hide her. He kept a hand firmly on the small of her back, a gesture of possession that made every wolf in the room avert their eyes. He sat her down on a velvet chair, brought by a trembling servant, then turned to face the assembly. Alpha Marcus, now dressed but looking pale and sweaty, stood by the fireplace. "Explain," Calen demanded. 22 years. You labeled her latent. You treated her as a slave. and yet she carries the blood of the ancients. We didn't know, Marcus protested, his voice cracking. We have the medical records. Dr. Peterson tested her every year. No wolf gene. Nothing. Then Dr. Peterson is incompetent, Kaelin said coldly. Or he was paid to lie. Your Majesty, a voice cut in. It was Elder Thomas, clutching a leather-bound book. If I may, the legends speak of this. The White Wolf, the Null who carries the pure moonlight. They appear once every 1,000 years. Their scent is masked until they meet their true mate. Until then, they appear human. The room gasped. The implication was clear. Sarah Miller, who had shifted back and was nursing a broken arm in a sling, stepped forward. Her face was twisted with jealousy. This is ridiculous. She attacked me. She's feral. The council laws are clear. Any wolf that attacks a ranked member without provocation must be put down. She pointed a shaking finger at Elara. She's a danger to everyone. Look at her. She's not a queen. She's a freak. Kaelin turned to Sarah. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. A danger, Kaelin repeated softly. The only danger here, Sisra, is your inability to recognize your betters. He walked over to Elara. He knelt on one knee, a shocking display for a king, and took her hand. He lifted it, inspecting the dirt under her nails, the scars from years of scrubbing pots. This woman, Kaelin announced, his voice projecting to every corner of the hall, is not latent. She is Apex. He stood up and faced Marcus. I am invoking the royal decree of 1892, the right of claim. Alpha Marcus's eyes bulged. You can't. That strips the pack of all rights to her. That makes her a sovereign entity under the crown. I can, and I have. Kaelin pulled a folded document from his inside pocket. He always traveled prepared. He threw it onto the table. Elara Vance is no longer a member of the Blackwood Pack. She is under my direct protection. And furthermore, he paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. He looked at Elara, his golden eyes softening for the first time. I am declaring her my intended. Pandemonium broke out. Intended. The king has found a mate. The kitchen girl. Kaelin silenced them with a single growl. We leave in 10 minutes, Kaelin told Elara. Go get whatever you wish to keep. Though looking at how they treated you, he glared at her tattered grey clothes. I doubt there is anything here worth saving. Elara stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she felt a strange new strength coiling in her gut. She looked at Sarah, who was crying silently in rage. She looked at Alpha Marcus, who looked defeated. I have nothing here, Elara said, her voice raspy but clear. Let's go. As they walked toward the door, Kaelin stopped. He turned back to Marcus. Oh, and Marcus. Yes, Your Majesty. I'm taking your title. You are no longer Alpha. You will report to the Northern Mines for reassignment as a laborer effectively immediately. Perhaps a few years of scrubbing floors will teach you the value of those you deemed useless. Kaelin didn't wait for a response. He guided Elara out into the cool night air, where a helicopter was descending onto the lawn, its blades whipping the wind into a frenzy. Elara looked up at the machine, then at the man, the king, who was holding her hand. Where are we going? She shouted over the noise of the rotors. Kaelin smiled a dangerous, breathtaking smile. To the capital, Elara, to find out exactly what you are, and to hunt down the people who tried to hide you from me. As the helicopter lifted off, leaving the Blackwood estate shrinking below them, Elara realized the truth. The servant girl was dead. The White Wolf had been born. But the real danger wasn't back in Blackwood. It was waiting for her in the capital. The capital wasn't a city. It was a fortress of glass and steel built into the side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The royal estate known as the Obsidian Palace looked down on the world like a sleeping dragon. For Elara, it was terrifying. She had gone from sleeping on a cot in a damp cellar to a suite larger than the entire Blackwood pack house. Her bedsheets were made of Egyptian silk. Her bathtub was carved from a single piece of black marble. Servants high-ranking wolves, who would have spat on her 2 days ago now, bowed so low their noses touched the floor when she walked by. "Good morning, my lady," they murmured. "Is the temperature to your liking, my lady?" But Elara felt the weight of the eyes watching her. To them, she wasn't a queen. She was a curiosity, a freak, the kitchen wolf who had bewitched the king. Kaelin was trying. He showered her with gifts, rare books, jewels, dresses that cost more than a car. But he was also a king at war. He spent 18 hours a day in the war room, dealing with the fallout of the Blackwood incident. Elara was left alone in the golden cage. On her 3rd day, she wandered into the royal library. She was looking for answers about the White Wolf. Kaelin had locked the restricted section, but the door was slightly ajar. Inside she found a man sitting at a mahogany desk. He wasn't a wolf. He was human, a slight, bespectacled man in a lab coat. "You shouldn't be in here, Miss Vance," he said without looking up. Elara froze. "Who are you?" "I am Dr. Adrian Cray," he said, turning a page of a thick file. "Chief geneticist for the Crown. And I've been reading your file." He tapped the folder. It was stamped with the Blackwood crest. "My file?" Elara stepped closer. "But I was latent. There was no file." Dr. Cray chuckled dryly. "Oh, there was a file, Elara. It was just buried." He opened it. "Did you know your mother didn't die in childbirth, as Alpha Marcus told you?" The air left the room. "What, Elena Vance?" Cray read. "She was a high-ranking Omega from the Silver Moon Pack. She disappeared 23 years ago. According to this," he pointed to a highlighted paragraph, "she was taken to a private facility in Nevada, a facility owned by Councillor Richard Sterling." Sterling? The name made Elara's skin crawl. Richard Sterling was Kaelin's political rival, the head of the traditionalist faction. He believed in blood purity and hated mongrels. "Why would Sterling care about my mother?" Elara whispered. "Because," Cray said, removing his glasses, "Sterling was trying to breed the perfect weapon, a wolf that could channel pure lunar energy. He failed with your mother. She died trying to escape. But you were the success." Elara felt sick. She wasn't just a latent wolf who got lucky. She was an experiment. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because Sterling is coming here tonight," Cray said, closing the file, "for the Blood Moon Gala. And if he finds out that the king has you, he will activate the fail-safe. Fail-safe. You have a block in your mind, Elara, a hypnotic trigger planted when you were an infant. If Sterling says the trigger words, your mind will break. You will turn into that white wolf, and you will kill everyone in this palace, including Kaelin." Elara backed away, shaking her head. "No, you're lying." "Am I?" Cray slid a small vial across the desk. It was filled with a shimmering blue liquid. "This is a suppressor. It will stop the shift. If you want to save the king, you drink this before the gala. You stay human. You stay useless. It's the only way to keep him safe." Elara stared at the vial. Was this true, or was Cray working for Sterling? Before she could answer, the heavy oak doors swung open. Kaelin stood there looking magnificent and exhausted. "Elara, I've been looking for you." He glared at Dr. Cray. "Leave us." Cray bowed smoothly, hiding the vial in his palm. "Of course, Your Majesty." As he passed Elara, he whispered, "Think about it." Kaelin walked over and wrapped his arms around her. He smelled of rain and iron. "Are you all right? You're trembling." "I'm fine," Elara lied, burying her face in his chest. "Just nerves about the gala." Kaelin kissed the top of her head. "Don't be. Tonight I present you to the council. Once I claim you publicly, no one can touch you. Not Sterling. Not anyone." Elara closed her eyes. Kaelin thought his title could protect her. But if Cray was right, the danger wasn't outside the palace. It was inside her own head. The grand ballroom of the Obsidian Palace was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The elite of the werewolf world had gathered. The air buzzed with gossip. "That's her. The scrub girl. She looks fragile. I give it a week before he tires of her." Elara walked down the grand staircase on Kaelin's arm. She wore a gown of silver silk that shimmered like liquid moonlight. She looked regal, but inside she was screaming. Every time she looked at the crowd, she searched for Councillor Richard Sterling. She spotted him near the bar. He was an older wolf, silver-haired, with a face like a hawk. He was watching her. He raised a glass in a mock toast, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. Does he know the trigger words? Elara wondered. Is he going to say them now? She touched the small pocket, hidden in the folds of her dress. The vial from Dr. Cray was there. "Stay close to me," Kaelin murmured, sensing her spike in heart rate. "The council is about to begin the toasts of allegiance." They moved to the high table. A server approached with a golden tray, holding 2 ornate chalices, one for the king, one for his intended. "Tradition," Kaelin explained softly. "We drink the wine of the ancestors. It bonds our scents together, for the pack to smell." Elara reached for her chalice. Her hand shook. "Wait," a voice boomed. Richard Sterling stepped forward from the crowd. The room went silent. "Before we drink to this union," Sterling said, his voice smooth as oil, "we must address the rumors. Is it true, Your Majesty, that this girl has no lineage, no papers? That she is in fact a laboratory construct?" Kaelin's growl vibrated through the table. "Careful, Richard. You are speaking of my queen." "I am speaking of the safety of the realm," Sterling shouted, playing to the crowd. "We cannot have a mongrel on the throne. I demand she be tested right now. Enough." Kaelin slammed his hand on the table. "I will not have her insulted. Then let her drink." Sterling pointed at the chalices. "If she is worthy, the ancestors will accept her. If she is an abomination, well..." Kaelin turned to Elara. "You don't have to do this. I can rip his throat out right now." Elara looked at Sterling. He wasn't looking at Kaelin. He was looking at her, his eyes focusing intently. He mouthed a word. It looked like ascension. A sharp pain spiked in Elara's skull. A red haze clouded her vision. Kill the voice in her head whispered, "Kill the king." It was true. Dr. Cray was right. Sterling was activating the sleeper agent. Elara's hand gripped the chalice. She felt the wolf inside her clawing to get out, not to protect, but to slaughter. She had to stop the shift. She had to take the suppressor. But she couldn't reach the vial in her pocket without everyone seeing. She looked at the wine. The wine of the ancestors. It was potent. Maybe it would knock her out. "I'll drink," Elara said, her voice strained. She lifted the heavy gold cup. Sterling smiled. He expected her to shift and attack. Elara brought the cup to her lips. But just as the liquid touched her tongue, her nose, her heightened white wolf nose, detected something under the scent of grapes and spices. Bitter almonds. Aconite. Wolfsbane. The wine was poisoned. It wasn't a test of lineage. It was an execution. If she drank it, she would die. If she didn't drink, Sterling would trigger the shift and she would kill Kaelin. Time froze. Elara looked at Kaelin. He trusted her. He was ready to drink from his own cup, which was likely also poisoned. She had to save him. "Kaelin, no!" Elara screamed. She didn't drink. Instead, she threw the contents of her chalice directly into Richard Sterling's face. The reaction was instant. The wine hissed as it hit Sterling's skin, burning like acid. He screamed, clawing at his eyes. "Poison!" Elara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The wine is poisoned." Kaelin dropped his cup. He looked at the sizzling liquid on the floor, then at the screaming counselor. "Seize him!" Kaelin roared. Guards swarmed Sterling. But the chaos wasn't over. "Ascension! Ascension!" Sterling shrieked, even as he was being dragged away. He was shouting the trigger word. Elara fell to her knees, clutching her head. The pain was blinding. The white wolf was tearing through at her mental barriers. Her bones began to crack. She couldn't stop it. "Kaelin," she gasped, looking up at him with terrified eyes. "Run!" Kaelin didn't run. He dropped to his knees in front of her. He grabbed her face in his hands, ignoring the golden light beginning to burst from her skin. "Fight it, Elara," he commanded. "You are not a weapon. You are my mate. Look at me." Elara's eyes were glowing pure white. Her teeth were lengthening. She raised a clawed hand, ready to strike him down. "I love you," Kaelin whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was an alpha's claim. He poured his own power, his own dominance into her. He flooded her mind with his memories, his love, his iron will. The red haze in Elara's mind collided with Kaelin's golden aura. The trigger word shattered. Elara gasped, the light fading from her eyes. She collapsed against him, human, weeping, and exhausted. The room was dead silent. Kaelin stood up, lifting Elara into his arms like a bride. He turned to the stunned crowd, his eyes blazing with murder. "Lock the doors," he said to his head enforcer. "No one leaves. I want to know who helped Sterling poison the wine. And I'm going to start." He looked directly at Dr. Cray, who was trying to sneak out the side exit, with the geneticist. The sub-basement of the Obsidian Palace was a place where light went to die. The walls were reinforced concrete, dampened with acoustic foam, so that no scream could ever reach the ballroom floors above. Elara Vance stood in front of the heavy steel door, smoothing the tactical fabric of her black combat pants. She had traded the silver silk gown for gear that Kaelin's personal guard usually wore. The transformation wasn't just physical. The terrified girl who had scrubbed floors in the Blackwood packhouse was gone, burned away by the poison and the revelation of her true nature. Kaelin leaned against the corridor wall, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked exhausted, his tuxedo shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. But his eyes were fixed on her, with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You don't have to do this, Elara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "My interrogators can handle Cray. They can peel his mind apart, layer by layer, until we know everything Sterling planned." "No," Elara said, her voice steady. He was the one who read my file. He was the one who knew about my mother. This is my history, Cailan. I need to hear it from him. Cailan nodded once, pushing off the wall. Then I'm coming in with you. Elara swiped the keycard. The maglock disengaged with a heavy thud, and the door swung open. Dr. Adrian Cray was zip-tied to a bolted metal chair in the center of the room. He looked small and pathetic without his lab coat, his expensive dress shirt stained with sweat. When Elara entered, he flinched, expecting a blow. She didn't hit him. She simply pulled a chair opposite him, turned it around, and straddled it, resting her arms on the backrest. She stared at him. Her eyes were currently violet, but the gold flecks swirling in the irises warned of the wolf lurking just beneath the surface. "Tell me about Project Ascension," she said. Cray swallowed hard, looking past her to Cailan, who stood in the corner, like the Grim Reaper. I can't. Sterling has protocols. If I talk the fail-safes, Richard Sterling is currently unconscious in the infirmary with third-degree chemical burns on his face, Elara interrupted. He isn't coming for you, but the king is standing right there, and I am sitting right here. You are calculating the wrong risk, Doctor. She leaned forward, and for a split second, her eyes flashed fully gold. The air in the room grew heavy, the atmospheric pressure dropping as her aura expanded. It wasn't the aura of a normal wolf. It was the crushing weight of an apex predator. Cray began to weep. "It started 30 years ago," he stammered. "Sterling. He was obsessed with the first pack, the mythology of the white wolf. The texts say that the moon goddess only grants that form to a vessel capable of holding pure lunar energy without burning out." "My mother," Elara whispered. "Eleanor." "Yes," Cray nodded frantically. "She was a natural anomaly. Her genetic markers were off the charts. Sterling's team... We took her. We tried to enhance what was already there. We wanted to create a wolf that could command others, not through fear, but through biological imperative. A sovereign." Elara felt a wave of nausea, but she pushed it down. And she died. The energy was too much. Her body couldn't hold the shift. She died giving birth to you. Cray looked at Elara with a mix of horror and scientific reverence. "We thought you were a dud, a failure. You showed 0 wolf markers. You were latent, so Sterling dumped you at the Blackwood Pack to be watched, a discarded experiment." "I wasn't a failure," Elara realized aloud. "I was dormant." "You were incubating," Cray corrected. "The power was so immense, your body had to mature fully before it could risk a shift. If you had shifted at 16, like a normal wolf, the energy would have vaporized you. Your uselessness was a survival mechanism." Silence stretched in the room. Cailan moved from the corner, placing a heavy hand on Elara's shoulder. The heat of his touch anchored her. "And the trigger words?" Cailan asked, his voice cold as ice. "Ascension. Why program her to kill me?" "Because Sterling knew," Cray whispered. "He knew that if she ever fully unlocked the White Wolf, she would be the only thing on Earth powerful enough to kill a royal alpha. He wanted a weapon to take your throne. He turned a child into a sleeper agent." Elara stood up slowly. The plastic chair scraped against the concrete floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. She walked over to Cray, who squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for death. She leaned down to his ear. "You spent 20 years studying biology, Doctor, but you forgot the most basic rule of nature." Cray opened one eye. "What?" "You can't tame a storm," Elara said softly. "And you certainly can't own one." She turned to Cailan. "Get him out of my sight. Send him to the northern mines. Let him see what it's like to work until his hands bleed just like I did. But keep him alive. He's the only witness we have to dismantle Sterling's entire network." Kaelan smiled, a vicious, proud thing. "As you command, my queen." 2 days later, the Obsidian Palace was in a state of controlled chaos. The coronation had been fast-tracked. The attempted coup by the traditionalist faction had failed, but the kingdom was fragile. Kaelan needed to show strength. He needed to show unity. But before the crown, there was the matter of the guests. Elara stood on the balcony of the royal suite, looking out over the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada. The wind whipped her hair around her face. She felt a presence behind her, the familiar scent of rain and ozone. Kaelan wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "They are assembled in the great hall," he murmured into her hair. "Everyone. The council, the press, and the Blackwood Pack." Elara stiffened slightly. "Marcus, and Sarah, and the elders. They were detained at the border trying to flee back to their territory." Kaelan kissed the sensitive spot behind her ear. "You don't have to see them. I can have them exiled, or executed. The word is yours." Elara turned in his arms to face him. He looked regal in his ceremonial dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, but his eyes were soft. "I need to see them," she said. "Not for revenge, but for closure. They spent my whole life telling me I was nothing. If I hide from them now, part of me will still believe them." Kaelan took her hand and kissed her knuckles. "Then let us go and show them exactly who they tried to break." The great hall was silent when the heavy double doors opened. This wasn't a party like the gala. This was a tribunal. The high-ranking wolves of the kingdom stood along the walls, leaving a wide aisle down the center. In the middle of the floor, kneeling on the marble, were the remnants of the Blackwood leadership. Alpha Marcus looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a shaking terror. Beside him, Sarah Miller kept her head down. Her shoulders hunched. They smelled of fear, sharp, acrid, and pathetic. Elara walked down the aisle. She didn't hurry. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the stone. She wore a dress of white velvet that trailed behind her like a bridal train, but the cut was severe military. She wore no jewelry except for a single choker of obsidian. She stopped 5 feet from Marcus. He slowly looked up. When he saw her, his eyes widened. He opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to apologize. "Don't," Elara said. She didn't shout. She didn't growl. She spoke with the calm indifference of a mountain addressing an ant. "Elara," Marcus croaked. "Please, we didn't know. If we had known you were special." "That is your crime, Marcus," Elara cut him off. "Not that you treated a queen like a slave, but that you treated a person like a slave. You only respect power. You only value strength. That makes you weak." She looked at Sarah. The girl who had made her childhood a living hell refused to meet her gaze. "Look at me, Sarah," Elara commanded. Sarah flinched, her head snapping up. Tears were streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Elara. Please don't kill us." Elara looked at them. These people who had been the monsters under her bed for 22 years. Suddenly they didn't look like monsters. They looked small, petty, inconsequential. "I'm not going to kill you," Elara said. A ripple of shock went through the room. "Killing you would imply that you are a threat, that you matter." She turned to the royal guards. "Strip them of their ranks. Remove them from the Blackwood lands. They are to be resettled in the outer territories as Omegas. They will work for their food." They will clean for their keep. And if they ever speak my name again, cut out their tongues." She looked back at Marcus one last time. "You wanted me to be a servant, Marcus. Now it's your turn. Serve well." She turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't look back as the guards dragged the weeping former Alpha away. She felt Kaelin take her hand, squeezing it tight. "That was merciful," Kaelin noted as they ascended the dais. "No," Elara replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "Mercy would be a quick death. I gave them a lifetime of irrelevance. That is a far worse punishment for an Alpha." The sun began to set bleeding fire across the sky, marking the beginning of the coronation of the moon. The ceremony was moved to the apex, a flat granite plateau at the very top of the mountain range, accessible only by a winding, treacherous path. Thousands of wolves had made the pilgrimage. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a sea of people stretching as far as the eye could see. Torches lined the perimeter, flickering in the high-altitude wind. The scent of pine snow and anticipation was thick in the air. Elara stood at the altar, the wind whipping her white dress around her legs. Kaelin stood beside her, holding the crown of the ancients, a delicate filigree of platinum and moonstone. The high priest, an ancient wolf with milky eyes, stepped forward. He didn't use a microphone. His voice was amplified by magic booming across the valley. "Tonight we do not just crown a queen," the priest intoned. "We welcome a legend back to the earth. The cycle has turned. The white wolf has returned." He turned to Elara. "Elara Vance, do you accept the bond of the land? Do you accept the blood of the pack?" "I do," Elara said. "Then show us," the priest shouted. "Reveal the spirit within." The crowd roared. Kaelin stepped back, giving her space. He looked at her with such pride, it almost brought her to tears. "Let it out, Elara." He mind-linked her. "Let them see you." Elara closed her eyes. She reached deep inside herself, past the trauma, past the fear, past the years of being called runt and useless. She found the ball of golden fire that had been burning in her gut since birth. She pulled the thread. The transformation was instantaneous and violent. It wasn't the cracking, popping shift of a normal wolf. It was an explosion of light. A shockwave of pure energy blasted outward, knocking the torches flat. Where the girl had stood, a creature of myth now towered. The white wolf was massive, easily 8 feet at the shoulder. Her fur was not just white. It was pearlescent, shimmering with every color of the spectrum like the surface of a bubble. Her claws were solid gold. Her eyes were 2 burning suns. She threw her head back and howled. It was a sound that vibrated in the marrow of every wolf within 100 miles. It was a call to arms, a lullaby, and a decree all at once. Kaelin shifted then. The Midnight King appeared beside her, a shadow to her light. He was huge, terrifying, and lethal. But when he approached the white wolf, he lowered his head. He nuzzled her neck, submitting to her power, acknowledging her as his equal. Perhaps even his superior in the spiritual realm. The crowd below erupted. Thousands of wolves shifted in response. A chorus of howls rose from the valley, a cacophony of loyalty that shook the mountains. Elara looked down at her kingdom. Her vision was sharper than anything she had ever known. She could see the individual needles on the pine trees miles away. She could see the fear in the eyes of her enemies and the adoration in the eyes of her people. She felt the crown settle on her head, not the physical metal one, but the metaphysical weight of the pack. She wasn't Elara the runt. She wasn't Elara the servant. She was Elara the white wolf. She was the moon's wrath and the pack's salvation. She looked at Kaelin. "Let's go home," she said in his mind. "After you, my queen," he replied. Together, the white wolf and the black wolf turned and ran. They leaped from the dais, racing down the mountain path, two comets of light and shadow streaking through the dark bound for a future that was finally truly theirs. Wow. Just wow. I honestly have goosebumps. The way Elara handled Marcus and Sarah in the end, I gave them a lifetime of irrelevance. That is one of the coldest, most satisfying lines I have ever read. It really drives home the point that the best revenge isn't violence, it's thriving so hard that the people who hurt you become nothing more than a footnote in your story. And can we talk about that final shift, the imagery of the white wolf and the midnight king running down the mountain together? It's the perfect balance, yin and yang, power and protection. I think we all need a Kaelin in our lives who knows when to step up and when to step back and let us shine. I want to hear from you guys in the comments, be honest. If you were Elara, would you have been merciful like she was? Or would you have gone full Dragon Queen on the Blackwood pack? I think I might have been a little less forgiving, but that's why she's the queen, and I'm just reading the story. Drop a comment with your verdict, Team Mercy or Team Revenge. If you loved this journey from useless to goddess, please show some love. Smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm find more wolf lovers like us. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next saga. We have a spicy alpha billionaire story coming up next week that you do not want to